Let's go into the Oz report. Today is July 2nd, and in stream, we just finished the interview with CCP Psych. So today's Oz report is going to be rather quick, I would say. If we look at what is trending up this week, we're seeing, for example, things like Technetium, which is great because Technetium hasn't been expensive in a long time. I think there's a lot of people that invested in it over the years, at least market traders have. So it's one of the last raw moon materials to bounce back to a price region where it was a few years ago. We saw moon materials drop down in price really excessively during the resource redistribution phase that we were in after scarcity. So now with increased content from the latest expansions, with new ships in the game, there's increased demand for raw materials, and Technetium is now one that is benefiting from that. We're seeing some advanced moon materials also increasing in price there. We talked about last week how some of them spiked initially after the Viridian expansion, then they went down, and there's just a lot of volatility in there right now. If you're into manufacturing, or you understand quite well which ships are in demand and which use which materials, then right now moon materials and advanced moon materials is definitely one area where opportunities are for making profits, but it's something that you should stay away from for sure if you're not versed in that area. There's always some dead space modules in here. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But let's look at what's trending down. Interestingly enough, contaminated Lorentz fluid is one of the largest salvage materials in the game. It's a very big market. It had been going up and up and up over the last few weeks. It's mainly used in the construction of rigs for ships and structures, and so that has crashed back down 20% here. That's pretty extreme. Other than that, it's just your regular dead space modules that spiked last week and that are coming down now. And this week is going to be one of the only weeks that I just won't talk about dead space modules anymore, because I've talked about them so much in the last weeks. Let's jump over to highest trade volume versus yearly average. So this is the items that are trading at very high volume right now. So these are hot items, and I just seem to not be able to get the agency drugs out of here, so I need to mention them every week. Again, they've been dropping from events. They're just trading high, so that's all I'm going to say to that. Interestingly enough, we're also seeing high-grade Hydra Omegas in here that are trading at 250% the yearly average, and also recursive computing modules. Those are being sold a lot right now, probably because, if I remember correctly, they were used a lot in the faction warfare lore event that was going on, and I think that's over now. So I'm pretty sure that this is a lot of buying over the last few weeks, and now a lot of selling, because it's something that is not in that high demand anymore. Let's look at short supply. So what are the items that are in short supply on the markets? PLEX is always there. That's not because it's in such short supply. It's just because the market is so liquid. There's such a high amount of trade that the orders just don't stay on the market quick enough. And so compared to the daily trade volume, the supply just seems very low. But that's just working as intended. We're seeing, again, some dead space modules here. We're seeing cataclysmic electrical filaments right here. That typically just means, this is a tier 5 or tier 6? Which one's cataclysmic? Tier 6. Electrical filaments are just popular right now. They're especially of the high tier abyssal filaments. There's not enough out there to to keep the market stable if somebody wants to buy a big chunk because they want to farm them. And as soon as people figure out how to run the high tier abyssals more or less safely, they're very, very profitable. So they tend to every once in a while just sell out. What can you learn as a trader, or maybe as a beginning trader from this is a very cyclical market. And especially if you're looking at the higher tier abyssal filaments, you can typically make a fairly good buck to look at the ones that are trading below yearly average right now. Look at the game graph, look at the history over the last. In the game, you can just look at the last year, but out of the game, you can obviously do more. But typically, it's enough if you look at the last year and say, okay, these are trading fairly cheap right now. They typically come back. It's just a matter of time for somebody to figure out a new ship type or to make a guide, to make a video, and they typically bounce back. So in this week, it's just happened to be the cataclysmic electrical filaments, the ones that sold out. And this doesn't mean that they spike in price, but most often that correlation is there. If the supply is low, they will typically spike in price, or they're about to spike in price. So if you look at any of these items, if they haven't spiked yet, they are typically due to spike. The largest drop in supply is very similar in that, where did we have a large chunk of the supply bought out of the market? So where there's just not a lot of sell orders left compared to last week. And you can see that, somebody obviously bought out compressed crocite here in the markets, but also crystal implants apparently in very high demand right now. The epsilon, the delta, and the alpha make the top 10 of largest supply drops from last week. Again, we're seeing an abyssal filament here or two. We've already talked about the cataclysmic electrical filament, but also the fierce gamma seems to have dropped 70% in supply. That just shows you how people go in and buy them in large chunks. That's the buying behavior. It's a very dynamic market. And typically, there's the market for tier 3 or tier 4 and above just can't handle people buying 300, 400 of them because they want to chain run them for weeks on end, right? And that's how farmers sometimes work, especially in EVE Online. And so that's what makes these markets so interesting. Interesting also is that we're seeing a mycosarosin here, lime mycosarosin. These gases used in faction ships, if I remember correctly, they are they've for a long time they've been a bottleneck every once in a while. And interestingly enough, we saw the price of a lot of mycosarosin, a lot of these gases drop last week in the Oz report. We discussed it here because the speculation was that the new tier 2 dreads might be using a lot of gas, or at least some people were speculating on it buying the market out. So the price was already very steep. Then it dropped down last week. And we're still seeing now some of them either being bottlenecks or being bought out for other reasons. But there's one or two gases that are in the top 10, top 20 of items that have been bought out this week. And so if you're holding those right now, is a good time to have a look at selling them, because typically these spikes that you're seeing from people buying out chunks of the markets, those are the highest profit margins you're going to get, because the spikes are always extreme. The spikes are going to outweigh the slow increase that comes from an increased demand or increased supply over time. So when you see spikes, try to capitalize on it, because that's probably the best option that you have for making profits. Let's look at the most interesting category, and that's the most underpriced versus 52-week average. So looking at which items are the cheapest right now compared to where they have been all year on average. One item I want to point out here is the Elite Drone AI. it's really interesting because for this I might even open the game client here. Let's look at it here. If we look at Elite Drone AI, you can see that this is just this year. So this is already a low point, right? If you go back 2 or 3 years, this was in the millions, the price for Elite Drone AI. The reason for it is because it's a big input material for excavator drones, for example, that used to have their heyday in the Rorqual mining, multi-boxing mining days. Now, the decreased demand for excavators actually means that right now nobody in their right mind is producing excavators because you're actually losing money. I had an interesting talk with somebody in our community this week about what to do with those BPCs that you still have lying around for excavators. There's no point in producing them right now. The market is just living from the existing supply that is out there, right? So the BPCs right now at the current stage, they are worthless until it turns around and the demand increases, driving the price up. When that happens, that's the day when Elite Drone AI will come back, right? Yes, it's also used in other faction drones, but that's just not driving. The supply is outweighing the demand by so much right now that really the only thing that could bring back Elite Drone AI is these excavator drones. And so why do I say that? Because of course these are underpriced. Like right now, do I think a 500K for Elite Drone AI is massively undervalued considering the history of the item in EVE Online? Now, do I know that at some point excavators are going to come back? No, I have no idea. But is it an interesting speculation item to maybe dump a few billion in? Sure, I think it is. I think if the price it's already dropping more, even more. It's sub 500 now. I think for me it's a good investment. It's one of the items that I like to identify through these analyses that I do in a dashboard like this. So that's one. We're slowly seeing the agency drugs creeping out of here. That's good. They're recovering in price. I told you guys to invest in them. I hope you're profiting from this. Pyrolantia dose 1 apparently and Overclocker dose 2 and 3 are still too cheap. So you might look at those. Other than that, undervalued Dead Space modules are always a good idea. So Pith, X-Type, extra large shield boosters, I don't know what to say. They are going to be a good investment. Skill extractors still in the top 10, still trading 20% under yearly average. I posted in my community this week, I bought another 200 billion in skill extractors because they were, somebody was selling them at around 400 million in JITA. I couldn't resist. I think it's a no-brainer that it's going to recover. I've said this a few times. It might take some time, but it should recover. Unless there's another 50% off sale, and we all don't know that. Having said that, let's have a quick look at the other PLEX and PLEX related items. So let's go here. PLEX currently at 4.8, so it dropped back a little bit. That's good, right? Like right now, there's not a big sale going on in the NES store, so right now it's the price should be recovering a little bit. We had a 15% PLEX sale in the real money store not too long ago, but that was just eclipsed by the very good deals that could be had in the NES store with said PLEX, namely the multiple month Omega plus MCT sales. Those were just too good, and so that was putting too much pressure on the PLEX price, and now it should be pulling back a little bit. Extractors, again, we're seeing them dropping and not rising. That's surprising. But if you look at the price today, it's actually around 410 million. So it is actually recovering. Even though the short term trend is not looking that way. The injectors, they've dropped sharply, and again, I've been calling this almost every week on the Oz report. There's no way they weren't going to drop, because very, very cheap skill extractors have the side effect that you're going to have many, many more large skill injectors being produced, and a higher supply just means a lower price. Even if that's right now, the effects are not there yet for real, because maybe skill farming takes more time to take advantage of that. Even if that was the case and it wasn't there yet, just the anticipation of that is going to make a lot of investors and traders dump their large skill injectors onto the market. So that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If people think that prices are going to drop, then prices are going to drop even quicker. It seems like the short-term trend has come back a little bit, but large skill injectors have already lost a big chunk of their value. We're now at recovering quickly. It seems like today we're back at almost 900. Like, I think somebody probably invested in the dip. I think it's either somebody investing big or people skilling up for T2 dreads maybe. Last but not least, let's have a quick look at cerebral accelerators, because at long last, master-at-arms cerebral accelerators, at least they're recovering a little bit. I'm not going to reiterate why they're ridiculously underpriced right now. I've said that too many times in the last weeks. But ridiculously expert cerebral accelerators still haven't dropped in price. Public service announcement. If you're do not buy expert cerebral accelerators if your goal is to efficiently get skill points into your character. If you want cerebral accelerators, use master-at-arms cerebral accelerators. The skill points come down to about half the price. It's interesting to see what will happen with large skill injectors, but with the price, already locking at 900 million again for large skill injectors, that means that master-at-arms cerebral accelerators are by far the cheapest way to acquire skill points right now. Okay, that seems like it was longer than expected again, because once I get start talking about the market, I typically can't stop. So I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to return to the regular stream, and I'll see you guys